All right, educators, welcome. If you're diving into the IB Language A, Language and Literature course, you know it can feel, well, a little complex, right? So this guide is all about breaking it down. We're going to look at its philosophy, its structure, the assessments, everything you need into clear, practical steps. The goal here is to help you build an even more amazing course for your students. Okay, here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to start with a big picture, the IB's educational philosophy. Then we'll get into the nuts and bolts of the course architecture, SL versus HL. After that, we'll look at the 3 key lenses for analyzing texts. We'll wrap up by navigating student assessments and pulling it all together with some core takeaways for you. All right, Section 1, the IB educational philosophy. Before we get into the what and the how, we really have to start with the why. Seriously, to teach this course well, you've got to understand the philosophy that drives the entire IB program. It's the bedrock for everything else we're going to talk about. So, here it is, the mission statement. And look, I know this can sometimes feel like just jargon, right? But this one is different. It's a real call to action. We're aiming to develop students who are genuinely compassionate, who are active thinkers. And that line, other people with their differences can also be right, that's huge. That idea right there should be like a North Star in your classroom.
And that mission, it gets broken down into these 10 attributes of the IB Learner profile. And again, these are not just buzzwords to put on a poster. Think of them as the actual DNA of your lesson plans. So when you're planning, you can literally ask yourself, okay, does this activity help my students be inquirers? Or is this assessment giving them a chance to be reflective? This is how you take that big, lofty philosophy and make it real in your classroom every single day.
Okay, let's move on to the what of the course, the architecture. We're going to get practical now and really break down the structure, especially that key difference between standard level and higher level, or SL and HL.
So, what's the real difference between SL and HL? Well, it really boils down to 2 things, depth and independence. You can see HL students get a lot more teaching hours, which lets them tackle 2 extra literary works. And that difference shows up in the assessments, too. For paper 1, they have to analyze 2 unseen texts, not just 1. And of course, they have the big one, the HL essay, which is a serious independent research project. So as a teacher, you have to think, how am I going to use that extra time to build those higher level skills they're going to need? So for your standard level students, the magic number is 4. 4 literary works. But here's the key, and it's a big one, balance. You have to give just as much love and attention to the non-literary texts. We're talking everything from ads to speeches to blogs. That balance is absolutely crucial. And for higher level, we jump up to 6 literary works. So the challenge for you, the teacher, becomes a little different. It's about how you use those 2 extra texts to help students build much more sophisticated connections between everything they're reading. It's all about prepping them for those tougher analytical tasks in the HL assessments. Okay, so we have all these literary and non-literary texts. How in the world do we guide students through them? Well, the good news is the IB gives us this amazing toolkit. It's called the 3 areas of exploration. The best way to think about them is like 3 different lenses students can put on to look at any text. And they overlap, which is where the really cool stuff happens. First up, we have readers, writers, and texts. This is your bread and butter. It's all about close reading. It gets students to really zoom in and analyze the craft of a text. How did the writer's choices about language or structure actually create meaning for the reader? This lens is how we help students move from just I liked it to a really sharp critical analysis. So how do you actually use this in class? Simple. You make this question the star of the show. In what ways is meaning constructed, negotiated, expressed, and interpreted? Just asking that question immediately stops students from just summarizing the plot. Instead, it forces them to dig into how the text is working its magic. It's a direct route to talking about authorial choices. Our second lens, time and space, is where we zoom out. This is all about context. It's asking, okay, how does this text reflect the world it was born in? Its culture, its history. But, and this is super important, it also asks how the text might have shaped that world. It's a 2-way street. This is how you connect a single poem or ad to these huge conversations about society. And here's the question that unlocks all of that. How important is cultural or historical context? This question pushes students to become little detectives, to investigate the world behind the words. Think about it. How does knowing about Victorian England totally change how you read a Charles Dickens novel? See? It's an incredibly powerful way to get those deep, nuanced readings.
And our third and final lens is intertextuality, connecting texts. This is where we get to see how all texts are basically in a giant conversation with each other. I mean, no text exists in a vacuum, right? They're always borrowing, responding to, or even arguing with other texts. This lens helps students see that huge, complex web of connections.
This guiding question is fantastic for driving synthesis. I mean, asking a student to compare a Shakespeare sonnet and a Nike ad might get you a blank stare. But if you ask, in what ways can these two very different texts share similarities, suddenly their brains start firing. They start looking for connections in theme, technique, audience, and that's how they build that bigger, more holistic picture of how communication works.
All right, so we've covered the why with philosophy, the what with the course structure, and the how with the three lenses. Now we get to the part that's on everyone's mind, assessment. Let's look at how all this learning is actually measured.
For standard level, the assessment is split pretty nicely across three main parts. As you can see, Paper 1 and Paper 2, those are the big external exams, and together they make up 70% of the final grade. Then you've got the individual oral, which is assessed internally by you, and that's the other 30%. It's a good mix, right? It tests everything from thinking on your feet to a polished, prepared presentation.
So let's break down that journey. First up, you've got Paper 1. This is where they have to analyze a non-literary text they've never seen before, right there, on the spot. Then there's Paper 2, which is more familiar territory, a comparative essay on two of the literary works you've studied in class. And finally, the internal assessment, the individual oral. This is where the student gets to shine, preparing an oral response that connects one literary and one non-literary work to a global issue that they choose.
Now for your higher level students, there's one more piece of the puzzle, the HL essay. This is a big deal. It's a 1,200 to 1,500 word formal essay where the student gets to choose their own topic and run with it. You should absolutely think of it as a bridge to university level work. It's their chance to really flex their muscles as independent researchers and academic writers.
Okay, we've covered a ton of ground. So what does this all mean for you when you're sitting down with a blank calendar planning out your year? Let's pull everything together into a few core takeaways for designing a really effective course.
Think of these as your 4 pillars for course design. First, variety. Please, go beyond the usual suspects. Bring in diverse voices, different time periods, a whole range of text types. Second, integration. Don't teach the 3 lenses like separate chapters in a textbook. Weave them together constantly in every single discussion. Third, autonomy. Give your students choices. Let them have a say, especially when they're picking topics for their assessments like the individual oral. And finally, accountability. You want to give them freedom, for sure, but you also need a system in place to make sure all those IB boxes get ticked. Look, at the end of the day, this course is so much more than just a list of books and requirements. It's really a framework for genuine inquiry. The IB gives you the structure, the blueprint. But you, the teacher, you're the one who brings the spark. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. How are you going to take these frameworks and use them to shape inquiry and truly empower the critical thinkers in your classroom?